The chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel cast a golden glow over New York's elite, but Charlotte Voss felt only the cold grip of fear as she guided Nina through the crowd. One lingering look, one accidental brush of fingers, and the carefully constructed facade of her life as the untouchable CEO of Voss Innovations would shatter, dragging the woman she loved into the abyss of corporate ruin. Nina squeezed her hand once, a silent reassurance that only they understood, before letting go as they stepped fully into the light. "Remember, I'm just your assistant for tonight," Nina whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor Charlotte knew was there. The room buzzed with conversations about mergers, stock prices, and political favors, the kind of talk that could make or break careers in seconds. Charlotte nodded, adjusting her sleek black gown, the one that cost more than most people's annual salary, and forced a smile as a group of investors approached. "Charlotte, darling, you look fabulous as always," said Marcus Lang, the silver-haired chairman of Lang Financial, his eyes scanning Nina with mild curiosity. "And who is this charming young woman with you? New hire?" "This is Nina, my personal assistant," Charlotte replied smoothly, the lie rolling off her tongue like it had 1,000 times before. "She's been invaluable in preparing for the merger presentations." The word assistant tasted bitter, but it was necessary. In this world of cutthroat business and old money politics, being outed as a lesbian CEO could mean lost contracts, board revolts, and whispers that her success was due to distractions rather than skill. Nina played her part perfectly, smiling politely, her simple navy dress blending in just enough to not raise flags but still highlighting her natural beauty that had captivated Charlotte from the start. As the night progressed, Charlotte's mind raced with the internal battle that had been raging for months. She had built Voss Innovations from a small startup to a billion-dollar tech giant through ruthless decisions, firing loyal employees to cut costs, outmaneuvering competitors with calculated leaks, even leveraging personal connections in Washington to secure government contracts. Love had no place in that equation, or so she had believed until Nina entered her life 2 years earlier. But tonight, bringing her here was a risk she couldn't avoid. The gala was the perfect stage to network for the biggest deal of her career, the acquisition of a rival firm that would solidify her position as the queen of the industry. Yet every time she glanced at Nina, chatting with a group of wives near the bar, the conflict tore at her. How long could they keep hiding? How long before ambition forced her to choose? The evening wore on with toasts and speeches, but Charlotte's thoughts kept drifting to the private moments they shared in her penthouse overlooking Central Park, where Nina's laughter filled the silence of her otherwise lonely life. Those nights where they talked about dreams beyond boardrooms, where Nina encouraged her to be kinder, to see the human cost of her power plays. But Charlotte knew kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford if she wanted to survive in this arena. A rival CEO, Elena Reyes from Shadowtech, caught her eye from across the room, smirking as if she knew a secret. Charlotte stiffened, wondering if rumors had already started circulating about her close relationship with her assistant. By the time the main course was served, the tension was palpable. Nina returned to her side, their knees brushing under the table in a hidden gesture of support. "You okay?" Nina murmured. Charlotte nodded, but inside the fear grew. This was the environment where one misstep meant everything lost. And yet, the love she felt for Nina made her question if the empire was worth the isolation. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Charlotte watched them, imagining for one dangerous second what it would feel like to pull Nina into her arms in front of everyone. Instead, she excused herself to the terrace for air, the cool night breeze doing nothing to calm the storm inside her. Nina followed a minute later, as they had planned, standing close but not too close. "We shouldn't be out here together," Charlotte said quietly, yet she didn't move away when Nina's fingers brushed hers again. "I know," Nina replied, "but I couldn't let you face this alone." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the world outside the gala disappeared. The love was real, raw, and terrifying. But so was the cost of keeping it alive in a place where power demanded sacrifice at every turn. As the lights dimmed for the keynote speech, Charlotte excused herself to the powder room, Nina following a discreet minute later, their routine perfected over countless secret meetings. Inside the marble-tiled sanctuary, away from prying eyes, Nina pulled Charlotte into a quick, desperate embrace. "You're shaking," Nina whispered against her ear. This was a mistake. We should leave. Charlotte pulled back, cupping Nina's face with hands that had signed million-dollar deals without flinching. Leaving now would raise more questions than staying. I need this deal, Nina. The board is watching every move I make. If I land the Shadowtech acquisition, I become untouchable. Nina's eyes, usually so warm, clouded with the same conflict that haunted Charlotte's nights. And what about us? Every time you choose the company over everything else, I wonder how long I can keep pretending I'm just the girl who brings you coffee. The words stung because they were true. Charlotte had met Nina at a tiny cafe near the Voss headquarters on a rainy Tuesday morning 2 years ago. Nina had been behind the counter, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, serving lattes to stressed executives. Charlotte, fresh from firing her entire marketing team to meet quarterly targets, had ordered a black coffee and barely noticed the barista until Nina slid a napkin across the counter with a simple note. You look like you could use a reason to smile. That small act of kindness had cracked something in Charlotte's armor. They started meeting after hours, first for coffee, then dinners in out-of-the-way Brooklyn spots, then stolen weekends in upstate cabins where no one knew their names. Nina had shared stories of her struggling artist life, scraping by on freelance photography gigs, and Charlotte had found herself opening up about the loneliness at the top. Love had grown quietly, fiercely, until it became the only thing that felt real. But ambition had never left. When the board pressured her to cut research budgets, Charlotte did it without hesitation, even though it meant laying off people Nina had grown to like through Charlotte's stories. It's survival, Charlotte had told her then. Nina had nodded, but the light in her eyes dimmed a little. Now, standing in the gala powder room, that same dimming threatened to extinguish everything. I love you, Nina said, voice breaking slightly. But I won't be the secret you hide forever, if it means watching you destroy yourself. Before Charlotte could answer, the door opened and 2 women in designer gowns entered, forcing them back into their roles. They returned to the ballroom separately, the brief moment of honesty lingering like smoke. The keynote speaker, a senator with ties to tech lobbying, droned on about innovation and ethics, words that felt hollow to Charlotte. She scanned the room, noting Elena Reyes whispering to Marcus Lang. Something in their glances toward her table made her stomach tighten. Later, during a break, Marcus approached again, this time with a more pointed question. Your assistant seems remarkably well informed about the industry for someone new to the game. Where did you find her? Charlotte smiled tightly. She's a quick study. But inside, alarm bells rang. Had someone noticed how Nina anticipated deals before they were announced? Had her cover started to slip? Nina, sensing the shift, touched Charlotte's arm lightly under the pretense of handing her a drink. The touch was fire and warning all at once. The night was only halfway through, and already the carefully balanced scales of love and power were tipping. Charlotte knew one more push could send everything crashing down. Yet she couldn't bring herself to send Nina home. Not yet. The love that had once been her secret strength was becoming the very thing that could destroy her empire. The auction for charity pieces began after dessert, giving Charlotte a momentary reprieve to regroup. She bid aggressively on a contemporary sculpture, not because she wanted it but because it signaled strength to the room. Nina stood nearby, playing the attentive assistant, taking notes on her phone that were actually private messages to Charlotte. Reyes is watching us too closely. We need to be careful. Charlotte's thumb hovered over the reply button, torn between typing I know and the deeper truth she couldn't voice. I'm terrified of losing you. The internal war raged harder now. 2 months earlier, during a brutal board meeting, Charlotte had voted to reject a union proposal that would have protected lower-level employees. Nina had confronted her that night in the penthouse, tears in her eyes. Those people have families, Charlotte. You're becoming the monster you swore you'd never be. Charlotte had snapped back. Monsters survive. The weak get eaten. The argument had ended in silence, but the damage lingered. Nina stayed because love made her stay, but Charlotte saw the growing distance. Now, at the gala, that distance felt like a chasm she was forcing them both to walk across. A waiter passed with champagne, and Nina accepted 2 glasses, handing one to Charlotte with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. To survival, Nina toasted quietly. Charlotte clinked glasses, the crystal ring sounding too loud in her ears. Across the room, Elena Reyes raised her own glass in mock salute, her smile sharp as a blade. Charlotte's phone vibrated. A text from her CFO. Shadowtech just filed a surprise counterbid on the merger. They know our numbers. How? The question hit like a punch. Only a handful of people had access to those figures. Charlotte glanced at Nina, the woman who had sat beside her during late-night strategy sessions, who had offered insights that seemed almost too perfect. Doubt, cold and insidious, crept in. Could Nina have been playing both sides? The thought was absurd. Nina had no reason, no connections, yet the seed was planted. When the auction wrapped, Marcus Lang took the stage again, announcing a special guest. Tonight we have the pleasure of welcoming someone whose family has shaped this industry for generations. Please welcome the surprise appearance of Harrington Group's heir, who has chosen to remain anonymous until now. The room murmured in anticipation. Charlotte felt Nina stiffen beside her. The spotlight swept the crowd, and when it landed on their table, Marcus's voice boomed. Nina Harrington, it's time to stop hiding. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Nina's face went pale. Charlotte's world tilted. The poor girlfriend she had brought as cover was actually the heiress to the largest institutional investor in Voss Innovations, the very power broker who could make or break her CEO seat with a single phone call. The elite froze, champagne glasses paused midair, eyes wide with shock. Charlotte's hand, still holding the auction paddle, went numb. In that instant, every calculated risk, every hidden kiss, every whispered promise collided with the brutal reality of power. The revelation wasn't just shocking. It was catastrophic. The silence that followed Marcus Lang's announcement stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Nina Harrington, stood slowly, her simple navy dress suddenly looking like armor rather than camouflage. Cameras flashed from the press corner, phones rose discreetly, and the tycoons who had dismissed her as Charlotte's inconsequential assistant now stared with a mixture of awe and calculation. Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. Every board member in the room held stakes tied to Harrington Group. Every rival had courted the family for decades. And here she was, the ambitious CEO who had paraded the heir as her secret lover, exposed in front of the entire ecosystem that controlled her future. Nina's eyes found Charlotte's, pleading for something. Understanding, forgiveness, a way out. But Charlotte's mind had already shifted into survival mode. The same cold logic that had carried her through every crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Nina said, voice steady despite the tremor Charlotte alone could hear. I apologize for the deception. I came tonight as a private citizen, not as a representative of my family's interests. The words were perfect, rehearsed, but they did nothing to stop the whispers. Elena Reyes leaned toward Marcus, murmuring something that made him nod gravely. Charlotte's phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts from board members demanding explanations, from her lawyer warning of conflict of interest clauses. She rose, forcing a composed smile. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding. Nina has been assisting me on personal projects, nothing more. The lie tasted like ash. Nina's shoulders dropped a fraction, the first visible crack in her composure. The love they had protected for 2 years was now public currency, traded in glances and speculation. As the gala resumed with forced politeness, Charlotte pulled Nina aside near a marble pillar. Why didn't you tell me? She hissed, keeping her voice low. Nina's eyes flashed with pain and defiance. Because the moment I became Nina Harrington again, everything between us would change. You would see me as leverage, not as the woman who loved you despite your walls. The accusation landed hard because it was half true. Charlotte had already begun calculating. If she distanced herself now, publicly, she could spin the story as professional coincidence. The board might forgive. The merger could still happen. But the cost would be Nina, the only person who had ever seen the woman behind the CEO. We can fix this, Charlotte said, even as her mind raced through exit strategies. Nina shook her head. Fixing it means choosing, Charlotte. And I've watched you choose the company every single time. Before Charlotte could respond, Marcus approached, his expression unreadable. Charlotte, the board would like a word in private. And Nina, your father is on the line. The noose tightened. Charlotte watched Nina walk away, spine straight, and felt the first real fracture in the empire she had sacrificed everything to build. The night that began as a calculated risk had become the moment everything she valued hung in the balance. Power, legacy, and the love she now realized might have been the only thing worth saving. The private salon off the main ballroom felt smaller than it was, the air thick with cigar smoke and unspoken accusations. 5 board members sat around the mahogany table, their faces illuminated by tablet screens displaying stock tickers already reacting to the revelation. Charlotte stood at the head, the position she had fought for, now feeling like a defendant's dock. "Explain," Marcus Lang said simply. She chose her words like scalpel cuts. "Nina Harrington approached me 2 years ago under a different name, seeking anonymity from her family's spotlight. Our professional relationship evolved naturally. There was never any conflict of interest because I had no knowledge of her true identity until tonight." The half-truths slid out smoothly, honed by years of boardroom warfare. One director, a silver-haired woman who controlled 15% of voting shares, leaned forward. "And the personal nature of that relationship? Rumors are already circulating on every private channel." Charlotte met her gaze without flinching. "Personal matters are exactly that, personal. They do not affect Voss innovations." Inside, the words felt like betrayal. Nina was waiting somewhere beyond the doors, probably facing her own family's interrogation, and Charlotte was erasing her with corporate language. A text from Nina lit up her phone. "My father wants to meet you. He thinks this was strategic on your part." Charlotte's thumb hovered, then deleted the message unread. Survival demanded distance. When the meeting ended with a tense agreement to table the merger vote until Monday, Charlotte stepped back into the ballroom to find Nina gone. A single text remained. "I understand why you did it, but I can't watch you destroy us to save your throne." The finality of it hit harder than any boardroom loss. Charlotte drove home alone through rain-slicked streets, the penthouse empty and echoing. She poured a drink and stared at the city lights, replaying every moment. The first kiss in the cafe after closing, the nights Nina held her after brutal layoffs, the quiet promise that together they could be more than ambition. Now those memories were liabilities. By morning, the news cycle had exploded. Voss CEO linked to Harrington heiress in shocking gala reveal. Stock dipped 3%. Board members demanded damage control. Charlotte issued a statement denying any romantic involvement, framing Nina as a valued consultant. The cold decision was made. But when she looked in the mirror, the woman staring back was no longer the one Nina had loved. The empire stood, but the cost was a hollow victory. 2 days later, Nina's official resignation from any informal role arrived via lawyer. No note. No goodbye. Only the silence Charlotte had chosen. Weeks blurred into boardroom battles and late-night strategy sessions as Charlotte pushed the merger through despite the scandal. Stock recovered. The acquisition closed. She became the youngest chair in Voss history, the pinnacle she had sacrificed everything to reach. Yet every victory tasted like the champagne she had drunk alone the night of the gala. Nina had disappeared from public view, retreating to the Harrington family compound in Connecticut, according to the few whispers that reached Charlotte. No calls, no messages. The love that had once been her secret strength was now a ghost. One evening, standing on the same terrace where they had shared their last private moment, Charlotte received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph, the two of them at a hidden Brooklyn cafe, laughing over coffee, captured by Nina's own camera. On the back, in Nina's neat handwriting, "You won the game. I hope the boardroom keeps you warm." The words cut deeper than any rival's attack. Charlotte sat on the cold stone, the city sprawling below, and for the first time allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had lost. The empire was intact, but the woman who had built it was gone, replaced by the ruthless CEO the world respected and no one truly knew. She had made the cold decisions required for survival, distanced herself publicly, sacrificed the relationship, protected the brand. Each step had been logical, necessary, inevitable. Yet the irreparable losses piled up. The laughter, the trust, the one person who had seen her as more than power. In the quiet hours before dawn, Charlotte stared at the photo and whispered the question that would haunt every future victory. Was the empire worth the emptiness it left behind?